across her Roman nose. Every student stands at the top of their mat, eyes steady and tailbones tucked. She surveys the lot of us with a single eyebrow arched, then simply says, "Let's begin." From somewhere within the black expanse, a gong is struck. She informs the class the flow will be 3 hours long. Salutations, followed by strengthening asanas, followed by a series of deep stretches. The rumours are true. It will be tough. It will hurt. It will free you. We'll start in a downward-facing dog, the instructor says. And that's that. The gong continues to ring, never losing reverberation, never fading. When I was getting my nose redone, I joked with the anesthesiologist that I could beat the sedatives, stay awake through the whole surgery. He laughed and told me to count backwards from 10 and see how far I could make it. I never even began counting. I woke up being rolled into the recovery room, unaware a moment had passed since that conversation. Very much the same thing happens now. I find myself, mind blank and muscles on fire, in an eagle squat, a relatively easy pose, one thigh stacked over my other as I balance on one leg, but my muscles tremble as if I've just been through an intense series of holds. An hour or more must have passed. The gong still hums. The instructor places her hand on my shoulder, which should destabilize me in this one-legged balance, but I don't waver. "Good," she whispers, and my heart nearly leaps out of my chest. 45 more minutes go by in an instant. A peek at my watch tells me I'm back in a downward dog, one I don't remember folding into, and I'm aware of the instructor's footsteps next to my head. She must be coming to tell me I'm out of the class, that I've failed. Instead, I hear her crouch down next to my neighbour and lean in close. Barely audible, she whispers to Red Scrunchy, "Your knees are bent." She pauses. I steal a glance. It's true, Red Scrunchy's knees are bent. Her legs shake as she attempts to fix her form. "You're free to go," the instructor whispers to her. Red Scrunchy rolls up her mat and practically flees from the studio. I swear I can hear a sob as the door swings shut behind her. This means I'm safe for today. I've made it to the next round. I fold into my next pose, an upward dog, and realise I'm no longer in class at all. I'm at home, on the floor before my dinner table, occupied by my husband and 2 daughters. They look at me in bewilderment, and I fall out of my pose, startled. I rejoin them at the table and squeak an apology, not wanting to cause a scene. I stab a piece of endive with my fork as I try and fail to remember even coming home. Not 5 minutes later, a strange feeling bubbles up from deep within my chest. A sudden deep burning hatred, but towards what? Or whom? I have to put down my knife and fork and take a breath. I try to focus on my 6-year-old, telling her father about the iguana at school. But the feeling comes back. A tugging, urgent anxiety to get away, and fast. I can't help it. I slam down my utensils with a bang, frightening them. I make some excuse to get up and go to the Home Office. I spend the rest of the evening trying to remember the morning's flow based on muscle memory alone. It's impossible. I was in too deep a trance. Evening turns to night. My husband can put the girls to bed for once. This is much more important. Night turns to dawn, and I'm no closer, even playing a gong sound on my cheap Bluetooth speaker. When I show up at the yoga studio the next morning, it's clear no one else has slept a wink either. Tired eyes, sallow skin. As I pass by the 12 yogi statues in the welcome hall, I pause. Another student, a waifish linen-wearing brunette, pauses next to me. Not a word between us, but we're both thinking the same thing. How we'd give anything to take the place of any one of those statues, to never leave this studio again. So, when the gong rings out through the oppressively silent hall, it's like coming home. We're not quite desperate enough to fight our way into the studio yet, but there is an urgency to our footsteps once the doors slide open. The gong is struck again, and from somewhere within the shadows the instructor emerges. She starts the class in much the same way as yesterday. Before class this morning, I promised myself that I would be absolutely sure to remain alert this class. Well, so much for that. Maybe it's the fact that I hadn't slept a wink the night before, but now I slip out of consciousness immediately. I resurface this time in a pigeon pose in my living room. It's earlier in the day than yesterday, not quite dinner time. This is good. I dig in my purse, and when that comes up empty, in my husband's desk drawer for a couple of 20s, I catch the housekeeper before she leaves and tell her to pick up dinner. I can't be bothered tonight. I lock myself in the office again and try to find any memory of today's class. A few hours later, my husband knocks on the door, asking me to join for dinner. I feel a wave of anger bubble up in my stomach again. I don't answer. I don't want to think what will happen if I do. After dinner, another knock. Zoe wants to join me. Usually I have to beg and bribe her to accompany me to a Mummy and Me yoga class, but she must be feeling my absence tonight. I open the door to let her in, but when she sees me, she recoils. Something about my appearance must be frightening. She backs away, and a few minutes later, my husband comes in, asking what's going on. I shrug and wave him away, telling him I have to practice for tomorrow and not to wait up. It doesn't take much to shoo him away, thankfully, and I spend the rest of the night doing as I wish. The next morning, I see the wayfish woman again on my way into the welcome hall. She must have made it through yesterday's class. We lock bloodshot eyes and laugh in only the way sleep-deprived, desperate people do. It's not immediately clear to me who was sent home yesterday, but the class feels smaller. The gong hits, class begins, and the next 5 days pass in almost exactly the same way, showing up at 11:15 on the dot to pass through the 12 yogi statues and into the studio, where one less pupil attends each day, letting my anguish melt away as soon as the gong sounds, submitting to the instructor's firm directives, surfacing hours later, time dripping like manuka honey waiting for class the next day. 1 week after my first class at peak pose, I don't emerge from my trance by finding myself in a bound angle in the home office or in a hero pose in the kitchen. No, today I'm shaken awake by my shoulders in the middle of Comtesse Bistro on 92nd Street. My husband stares me in the face, horrified. I look down, or rather, I look up since I'm upside down in a scorpion pose, and right myself, despite the sea of staring faces. What happened? I ask. Are you serious? You just told me you won the yoga scholarship, and then you decided that our very frequent date spot was the best place to show me what you've learned, he says. That can't be right. It's only been a week. There are 5 more classes to go. I can't have won. I don't betray myself by saying anything. Let's go, he says flatly. Check, please. Outside the bistro, he stops short. What has gotten into you? I'm taken aback by the force behind his tone. I ask what he means. You've completely abandoned your family for a full week. You have to spend time with your daughters, feed them real food like a real mum. I'm tired of this. I haven't seen you in days. Oh, it's hard, is it? Not fun, I hear myself say. This is so unlike me. I love being a mum, being his wife. I should be upset at myself for saying such things, but I can't stop picturing folding back into a scorpion pose, balanced on my forearms with my feet hanging backwards over my head. He hails a cab and we get in. The ride is silent, tense. Suddenly, you have a problem with my yoga practice, I say. Not when you act like a normal person about it. You've been acting completely unlike yourself, he responds. And what if I did win the scholarship? You know how much this meant to me. Am I not allowed to go? I ask. He doesn't respond for a minute. Then, I didn't think you were actually going to get it. That settles it. We arrive home. Margot and Zoe greet us excitedly, but I can't bring myself to look in their eyes. They're just a distraction from what I know I have to do. I find myself storming into the bedroom, and my husband follows. He shuts the door behind us as I yank out my weekender tote from beneath the bed and begin packing. Seriously? He asks as I stuff the bag with leggings, sports bras, toiletries. Someone's shouting. I realise it's me. The last thing I see as I leave the apartment is my husband's frightened face. Well, now he knows not to cross me. The street's deserted. It's the dead of night. I walk south, knowing exactly where I'm headed. I push at the front door of the Peak Pose, and it gives easily. I was prepared to smash through the glass with a brick if it came to it. Good thing it didn't. Red Scrunchy is there in the welcome hall, leaning against the studio doors. She looks up at me like a wounded animal as I pass by the statues. I can't go in there, she whispers. I open the door to the studio with ease. Red Scrunchy gets up. Let me in, she begs. Let me in. Nothing's preventing her from following me inside the studio, but she doesn't. Go home. I hear myself growling back before sliding the door shut. I turn to the studio. The candle still burns at the centre of the endless room, but the usual gong doesn't ring. I could hear a pin drop, or a light snore. Turns out, I'm not the only one who escaped here tonight. The brunette waif from the second day dozes on her yoga mat, and to her right, a man in green shorts, folded perfectly in half, peeks up at me. Kicked out? He asks. Couldn't sleep, I say. I can't find the gong, the room. It just keeps going. I roll out my mat next to him, ready to continue trying to repeat the previous day's class. But after so many nights of non-existent sleep, I slip into easy, blissful unconsciousness. A tap on my shoulder wakes me. There's a sliver of early morning streaming in from the gap in the double sliding doors to the welcome hall. She's here, someone whispers. I'm on my feet in an instant, breathless. The instructor stands before us, completely unsurprised. She looks over the three of us and nods, grinning. Aren't you in a sorry state? Happens every session, she says. I wait for her to say something more, to tell me what's happening to us. Anything, but of course she doesn't. She sets up her mat at the front of the room and quietly begins her practice. The three of us follow her lead. She doesn't pay us any mind. She's not currently instructing after all, and this isn't class, so we try to copy her movements, in complete futility. I hear myself begin to whimper, then cry. I'm not the only one. The man next to me sobs. Please. He's doing the same thing as me, trying to keep up with the instructor's silent movements. She looks up. Please what? Teach. Patiently, she says. Class is in 2 hours. And my heart shatters into a million pieces. The two other students who have not yet been eliminated from the class show up a few hours later. At first they seem surprised to see us here, then upset that they hadn't considered they could escape to the studio after hours as well. The instructor disappears into the depths of the cavernous room to ring the gong, and finally, I feel whole again. The fight with my husband, the guilt of abandoning my girls, the dissatisfaction with the rest of my life, it all slips away. This is my time, all mine. When I come to at the end of class, the gong is beginning to quiet, and there are only 4 students left. The instructor opens the door to the welcome hall and says to us, I'm keeping the studio closed tonight. Stay here if you'd like. and for the love of God, get yourself something to eat. I'm so thankful I don't have to go back home. I try my best to follow the instructor out the front door, but she disappears as soon as she's through the beaded curtain. I wander down the street to a deli and get myself a granola bar with a wad of bills I find in my pocket, then drag myself back to peak pose to the welcome hall, past the line of statues. The studio door is locked. At a loss for what to do, I sink down next to one of the yogi statues and eat my snack. Exhausted still, I lean against the lifelike statue, then pull away with a gasp. It's warm. Solid marble in a cold room should be cool to the touch, not warm. It's slick too. Condensation collects on the outside. I've scrambled across the hall like a frightened animal, but curiosity gets the best of me. I approach it again and lay my hand on the statue's arm. It's folded into a bound wheel pose, its back bent all the way backwards, with its hands grabbing its ankles. His ankles. The statue depicts a young, slim man in billowing pants. While this is far from my favourite pose to do, the look of pure bliss on the statue's face tells me this was probably the model's #1 pick. He looks as serene as a still sea, eyes closed gently, no hint of struggle at all. I move on to the statue next to him. This one is a woman in half lotus crow. She too looks completely at peace, owning the pose to the fullest extent, like the gong is always playing in her head. And then I reach the statue near the entrance. She's in scorpion, my favourite pose too, supporting her body in a forearm balance with her feet in the air, hovering near the back of her head, just as I did in the restaurant with my husband. The welcome hall is cold, it's quiet, and the sun is either beginning to rise or set. I don't know how long I've been staring at her for. Something about her draws me in. I lean against her warm marble. A deep connection, the feeling that she is me, and I am her. At least, I wish I was, so I wouldn't have to leave everything behind to even be here, to feel the guilt of resenting my obligations. I'd give anything to exist without context, without choice, in peace. There's that anger again, bubbling up from deep within my stomach. It's not so unfamiliar anymore. I've run away from home and refused to eat or sleep like a child, and now Scorpion Girl is living the life I should live. I hate her. I hate her. So I give in to my anger and I push the statue. I don't expect it to give way, but it does. It topples back and forth, threatening to tip, and then it does. It hits the floor with a crack, splitting down the middle. Suddenly, arms are pulling me away as I attempt to scramble back towards it. And I swear, I hear the scorpion cry out. I'm dragged by the shoulders down the row of statues into the yoga studio. The sliding doors shut and leave me in darkness. I'm crying. Behind me, someone lights the ring candles and steps out before me. It's the instructor. I look up at her desperately, waiting for an explanation that will never come. I would have expected her to be cross, but her expression is unreadable. You really want it, she says, not asking. I can't do anything but nod my head, unable to speak. She responds. Well, class is starting soon. Go grab a spot. The instructor almost leaves the studio, but suddenly remembers something. By the way, your husband has been very curious outside, in case you want to reassure him that you're okay. I don't. I shake my head and roll out my mat. The last thing I want to do is to face the mess I've made, both inside the welcome hall and beyond it. I'll stay here, I say. I swear, she looks almost proud. I'll be out there cleaning up, she says, and leaves me alone. Soon, the 3 other students show up and class begins. I slip under immediately at the ring of the gong. When I come to, there are only 2 students besides me left, the brunette waif and the man in green shorts. I'm so close, closer than ever, to getting what I want. If I'm eliminated now, 2 days before making it to the end, there's no coming back. I have no choice but to make it, so I don't protest when the instructor locks up the studio for the evening. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm manic, but I don't care. I leave the building. I see the brunette wayfish woman leave after me, and I follow her, keeping a respectable distance between us. She stumbles around in the same haze that I'm in. Tired and lost and aimless, she heads northeast seemingly randomly. Avenue after avenue passes by. Men with Brooks Brothers laptop bags. Young tweens who point their phone cameras skyward. Mums with toddlers. They barely register to me. We reach Central Park. The crowd thins here. No one wants to be in the park after dark. Wave goes right in. I follow, and I keep following. 20 or 30 blocks north before it's completely desolate. She looks around, nearly catching me, then ducks into a bush. She must have run away from home as well. I wait, trying to quiet the anxiety of being so far away from the studio. She doesn't emerge. This is where she must intend to sleep for the night. I approach the bush with no particular plan in mind. At least, that's what I tell myself. There she is, asleep in fetal position in the dirt. I lean in, curious how she could be at peace enough to fall asleep when it feels like every nerve in my body is on fire. Turns out, I'm right. Her eyes snap open and she lunges at me. She pulls me to the ground hard, my shoulder making contact with the concrete. She lured me right into her trap, and I fell for it, blinded by being so close to my goal. Neither one of us has enough strength to do real damage with the weight of our bodies alone, which we both realise at the same time. She may be determined to make it to the last round, but so am I. I find myself fighting dirty, kicking and punching with abandon. It's fuzzy exactly how it happens, but I've pinned her. I try to wrap my hands around her neck, but she squirms out of my grasp. Once again facing the conundrum of being unable to incapacitate her with just my bare hands, I look around for a solution. There's a rock buried in the dirt beside us, and I grab for it. It's not as big as I would like, but it will have to do. I raise it above my head and bring it down. Once, twice. It's a short fight. She's out. So, these are the rules I'm playing by now. Will I be able to bring myself to do this again with the man in the green shorts? I leave the park quickly, ensuring I remain unseen. I crouch behind a dumpster in an alley between buildings and bide my time until the following morning, when I return to the studio. The events that happened last night could be a dream, a result of malnourishment and lack of sleep. I half expect the waif to show up to class, but she doesn't. And there's a missing statue where the scorpion woman once sat. The man with the green shorts arrives at the studio entrance at the same time. We size each other up. He would definitely win in a fight, there's no question, but neither of us tries to make a move. To fight. Both of us need to take this last class as much as the other. With a curt nod, we enter the centre, side by side. When the instructor arrives, she doesn't seem surprised to see that there's one less student. She merely comments, "So, we'll have one less class than planned. No problem," and strikes the gong. We begin in a downward dog. Unconsciousness beckons to me, an old friend. Instead of taking its hand today, I know I'll have to resist. As abhorrent as it seems to stay lucid during this point, it must be done. It takes everything, everything. I fight for every second of consciousness as the gong vies for my attention. It's like fighting an undertow or gravity itself. For 2 full hours, I manage to stay awake, listening to every command and cue. Despite the pain, it's glorious. The instructor's flow is so perfectly planned, so flawless. Being aware of each excruciating moment in every pose feels like a wonderful lifetime. is what I needed. The class builds to a peak pose. We go through a series of back bends, then of arm balances, then of shoulder stretches. It feels familiar. I bet my tennis bracelet, one of the good ones, on what the final pose will be. "Come to a mountain pose," whispers the instructor, and I stand at the top of my mat at the ready. I hear the thin man's feet plant on his mat a microsecond after mine. "Wheel," the instructor says like a sharp exhale. The urge to move automatically is stronger than ever, but I must savour every moment. I bend backwards, feet still on the ground, until my hands come to the floor behind me. It's difficult to wait for her next cue to take the next movement, but I do. "Come to your elbows," she says. Still in my back bend, I lower to my elbows. Finally, she gives her last cue into the pose I was born to do. "Scorpion," she says, "feet off the ground." I walk my feet closer to my head, and when I can't go any further, lift them one by one into the air, just above my head. A perfect balance, suspended between the security of the ground and the freedom of the air. It's heaven, the closest I've felt to happiness in almost 2 weeks. 12 breaths. Inhale, exhale, 12. Inhale, exhale, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I almost slip into a trance, but I fight. 5, 4, 3, 2. "Remove your arms," cues the instructor, and I feel my arms tug outward, wanting to collapse onto the crown of my head. But I don't obey the command. I remain in control. The thin man, having succumbed to the gong, does not. I hear him collapse his body weight onto the top of his skull, cry out like a wounded animal, go silent. Then there's only myself and the instructor. "Congratulations," she says, and my heart wells. When she says, "Stay for 30 more breaths, it's paradise," I savour every second I get in the pose. I focus on the slight shake in my arms, the minute muscle twitches in my core. I could stay in this pose forever. I'm so focused on the pride, the ecstasy of the moment, that I don't notice the needle inserted into the base of my skull, in my spine. It delivers what must be a cocktail of drugs via epidural. It paralyzes me, locking me into the pose I've been yearning for this whole time. The instructor reassures me, says this is the ultimate lesson in patience. I won't be able to feel being encased in stone, becoming one of the statues in the welcome hall. I'll replace the last yogi in scorpion pose out there. Her year's up, after all, and those that graduate from peak pose go on to become famous. She'll open her own practice, become wildly successful, just as she's always dreamed of. And so will I, eventually. "Don't worry," the instructor tells me. "I'll be able to breathe, my feeding taken care of through tubes. Electrodes placed throughout my body will keep my muscles twitching, preventing atrophy. With biological functions taken care of, my mind will be unburdened, free to explore its depths. Yoga is, after all, 90% mental work. Some don't make it through, but that's okay. Sink or swim. And certainly my family won't be there when I get back. As far as they know, I've been extended an invitation to the most prestigious yoga academy for a year-long retreat. And I accepted, without a second thought. They'll heal, yes, but they'll never forgive me. But at the end of my year, I will have the life I've always desired, and I've never been happier. The gong drones on and on and on. I become the scorpion as I finally allow myself to succumb to the gong and slip into the trance I've wanted to all along.